Welcome to the Reasons to Reason podcast. I'm your host and captain, Sal Galati. This is the show that's going to talk about all the things we're not supposed to: God, religion, and politics. So strap in, prepare to get offended, and maybe, just maybe, our nation can learn how to reason again. Thanks for stopping in for another conversation. I got my friend Zain here from high school. We hadn't chatted in a while, but we hooked up again, caught up with him. He's up to some interesting things. He's got a company we're making air fryers called Area Air Fryers. You can look up. But I thought it'd be really cool to bring him in because I've always enjoyed talking to Zain, even though it's been some time, because we could disagree on stuff and it's like nothing's personal. We're just like trying to get to the truth and figure out what's going on. And I think you'll notice that during the conversation. He's in the thick of it with these tariffs, and he has an insight into it that, the geniuses on TV that pretend to be experts in all things and don't even know how to tie their shoes or make a cup of coffee. He's got an actual expertise in it and insight into it. We're going to talk about what's going on, what's driving it, what's the intent behind it, what maybe would be some ideas to make this go smoother, what do we see happening ultimately. So hope you enjoyed the convo. If you like what we're doing, send it around with your friends. The show is growing. We appreciate you guys tuning in and then, passing it along to your network of influence. So without any further ado, my friend Zain.
Thank you very much, Sal. It's a pleasure to be here. Let's just dive right in. And starting with the basics, many people have this skewed knowledge of what a tariff is. So, we'll put it in layman's terms. Tariff is essentially the same thing as taxes, but the only difference is tariffs are brought to companies in bulk when they're importing product from other nations and other countries. For example, when you buy something at the grocery store, they're going to charge you tax, whether it's 7% or 10%, whether you're buying milk, whether you're buying cigarettes, or whether you're buying, a kitchen product or furniture. It could be anything, even a car for that matter. But before Trump's presidency, essentially America was a free trade nation, meaning most countries didn't incur any type of taxes, aka tariffs. And so if you were to import something from China, for example, right, look around your house, Sal, for example, everything you see here, 90% of this, including the pen that you're writing with, your microphone, your computer, your furniture, your appliances, refrigerator, everything you see here is out of China. We could talk about, the high level plan and, what Trump is trying to achieve, but there's a certain way to go about this, and we can talk about different ideas and different things, but essentially what he's done thus far in his first 100 days of presidency, right, is the day he came on, first thing he said is, hey, I want to bring all the manufacturing back to America. Back to America. Well, first of all, there's a problem with that. It was never in America to begin with. How are you going to bring it back to America when we never had it in the first place? We never had that infrastructure in this type of category, aside from, I don't know, cars maybe. What do you actually see being manufactured in America that the consumer actually is using? Very little. Plastics, bottles, something, drinks, consumables, that's about it. But everything else is from other countries. Take this spoon, which costs $1, right? A retail price for, if you go to buy a spoon at Walmart, it's going to be around $1. Walmart imports that at a cost of, 50 cents. Everything is pretty transparent now. And the tariff, aka tax on that, when they import, the day it enters America, they'll pay whatever that tariff was, which is it was negligible, like 2%, 1%. It's a free trade. That's why it's called free trade, because most of the tariffs are under 5% before Trump came on. Trump comes on and says, hey, I don't want these spoons made in China anymore. I want the spoon to be made in America. So rather than figuring out how to do that, what did he do is he stopped the imports from China. Essentially, the China tariffs right now are 135% or 140%, something ridiculous, to the point where nobody can manufacture at that price, at that tariff, because what's going to happen to that price of a spoon? From $1, if Walmart's cost goes up by 150%, how much of that is Walmart going to pass to the consumer? What's that going to do to the consumer retail price? And so right now, it's only been 100 days. But the day that he signed this executive order, all these containers were on the water, right? Mm-hmm. What about those goods that people had no idea that they were going to now have to pay 150% of the stuff they've already produced that's in transit, right? Because how long does it take for a spoon, or it could be anything from via ocean, from China or Asia or any other country? It takes about 30 days before it hits one of the ports in the U.S. And so that's the big starting problem is how do you combat this,
All right, so you raise a lot of points, and I'm taking it from very pro-sensitive to the businessman, and then I want to explain kind of my view as a U.S. citizen what's going on. As far as sensitivity to the businessman needs consistency. They need to know what the playing field looks like, and when you jar it really quick, it's not fair to the business owner. I don't think it's fair. Like, for example, if he's got a bunch of product out there and he's got to import it now and pay a cost that he didn't figure into his business, it's not fair to him. And I think Trump is sensitive to that. And this is why, like, they're kind of going on and going off. You said something, free trade. Was it free trade? Yes, we had low tariffs on stuff coming in, but our stuff going out had always had the tariffs on there. And I think, to me, he was doing a shock with the tariff to be like, get your stuff in line. And we're seeing countries come to the table now and say, yeah, okay, it was out of whack. Let's get it more even. As far as the infrastructure to build things, yeah, 60 years ago we built a lot of stuff here. But a lot of that stuff that we built is not stuff that we use per se, right? So like I actually, in my business, I'm an insurance business. We insure a lot of old auto manufacturing plants that are now been repurposed to other things. They're servers or whatever. It's not stuff that we used to build. So can we rebuild that infrastructure? I think so. I think it's important to have industry that builds things because I think that creates a lot more jobs than like a social media company. And you got to move this product around and it generates a lot in the economy. Those are things I'm seeing just short term. I know that can't happen overnight. So it's one of two things. Trump's completely naive in thinking he could do this and the manufacturing will come back overnight. Or he understands it's going to hurt for a while, but this is something that's absolutely necessary because the trade imbalance was so bad that ultimately we could have cheap crap, and that's great. But if more people are on welfare, more people are addicted to drugs, more people are on alcohol because they don't have a meaningful job, there's less family formation. Is the country really better off overall because we have access to cheap crap? I gave you a mouthful. Respond to what you want.
Yeah, no problem. Some very, very good questions and things you've raised. But yeah, there's definitely answers to all these. First of all, Trump isn't naive. He's been in business long enough. He's worth billions of dollars. Real estate, whatnot, product. He's been in all types of different businesses, so he's not naive at all, and he understands the situation. Now, why is he? The first point you brought up was the tariffs, right? On exports, the U.S. has nothing to gain. Those tariffs are tariffs that other countries are charging the U.S. product, but who's getting that money? The other nation. America doesn't get anything. Mm-hmm. So the Trump's agenda, I don't even know if it's to bring it, if the objective is to bring it back here or get them to give some type of incentive for America to carry their product. Because America, the nation, and so I can agree with Trump regarding, hey, America needs to benefit and needs a certain incentive to allow all its entrepreneurs to have these great opportunities, yada, 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 the great nation that it is, blah, 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 blah. We know all that. We believe in that, which is why we all work hard, which is why I personally started a business here. It's the land of opportunity, and it holds true to it, right? But not at this tariff, because it closes all the doors. Next, infrastructure is a very good point that you brought up, right? When it comes to infrastructure, there's certain infrastructure that America can create. But when it comes to consumer goods, sure, we can make it here, but with the laws of America and the requirements of what has happened in those 60 years that you talked about when America tried this before in the 70s and the 60s or whatever. They tried it, but they realized that, hey, if we were to do this, the cost to make the product here, if we were to satisfy all the labor laws and all that stuff, right, versus China, Malaysia, or Asia, or India, or wherever, is not going to be 145% tariff. It's not going to be 145% more. It's going to be 10,000% more. So they did an article I think a month ago or so. Forbes released an article on Apple. Perfect example. And they analyzed everything, and they said, hey, if an iPhone was made instead of China, now in America, rather than costing $1,000, it's going to cost, do you know what that amount is?
$3,500.
$35,000. More than a car.
But let's unpack. Why is it so much more expensive? You mentioned labor. Obviously, I mean, are we going to be honest and say there's slave labor in some of these countries?
No, it's not needed. That's just one component, right? But think about, see, China, there's not one factory making the iPhone. One factory specializes on the screen. Snapdragon specializes in the chip, the processor. NVIDIA focuses on the video card. These are all different factories that Apple has to pull together and then assemble it in California. That's why it says designed in California, made in China, yada, 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 all that stuff.
So they just assemble it here.
They'll just assemble
and it's almost impossible to recreate all that here.
Oh, you can't. Exactly, my point. Which is why when they said, hey, it's not just one iPhone factory. We have to make one screen, sapphire glass screen factory to make the screens. We have to make all these different components and make all these different production lines and factories to then assemble an iPhone. We need probably 20 to 30 different factories to assemble an iPhone.
So then again, we got to ask ourselves, is Trump naive? Is he stupid? Or I think he just wants to see that they're bringing over one thing. Apple's bringing over, we're going to make the screens here, and then he'll alleviate.
So first of all, in this situation, right, whether if you're creating a factory here, yes, you are right. You will employ jobs and you will help the community and the economy, yada, yada, yada. But if you're importing from China, you're still creating and indirectly creating other jobs, such as an import specialist, such as freight forwarders, people that are responsible to bring your product from China to America, clearing agents that are recording the tariffs and charging you. There's all these other types of jobs that you're employing indirectly by importing, so it comes out to the same thing.
I don't know. You could be right. I doubt that it's the same amount of jobs. It's probably a fourth of the jobs that are created if we actually made it here. But thing worth mentioning, we're talking about why it's so much cheaper to build over there than here. I think a big part of it is the environmental impact. They don't have the laws that we have here. And quite frankly, as a citizen, I'm glad I don't have manufacturing plants all over the place spewing up smoke. But that said, we still inhabit the same planet. If it's really free trade, if they're allowed to make something without following any of the environmental laws and spewing all the poison into the environment, I don't know. I think overall we're better off if we build this stuff in the appropriate way and not have this stuff getting into our environment. But the other question is, why is it if a company makes toys in this country, there's some laws as far as what chemicals go into the product, but if it comes over there, I mean, you could smell the cancer on it. If you're opening up somebody's boxes and don't realize you're getting sick, you get a headache when you smell this stuff. I don't let it in my house. So a lot there to talk about. We got the environment, and then I wanted to talk about your personal experience in your business, because that's not theory, that's not conjecture, that's not he said, she says, that's the reality. Yeah,
very good points. So rewinding back, one component we forgot to mention regarding these factories, and another reason why aside from the cost, of running a factory in America and paying the laborers, another big reason is the consumption of America versus the output of the factories. If they were to be in America, China isn't slave labor anymore, because I've been to these factories and we're in year 2025. 40 years ago, yeah, the environment and everything was way different, right? To your point, the safety standards, such as in toys. So now what's happened over the past 40, 50 years is you're right. It's never going to be perfect. And there's always going to be, we don't know at the end of the day what these people are putting. But the world, and America especially, has created regulations and agencies to specifically test and monitor these things. So whether it's my category is also very sensitive. Toys are also very sensitive, and I'll tell you why. Toys, for example, it's all children, right? They could put it in their mouth. So there's certain things that have to be met, right? So for that, FDA, Food and Drug Administration, has to approve anything that's in contact with your mouth or anything that touches the product and then goes into your mouth. The FDA has to approve it. So if you're not eating a toy, technically, right? But the Food and Drug Administration still has to approve of it, because they know that children can put it in their mouth. In an air fryer, for example, we know it's coming in contact with food, and then that food is going inside of your body, right? So there has to be certain regulations. So FDA has to approve that. Now, are they good? Some are not. And that's where the retailer comes in. So the answer to that question, right, is we as the consumer have to be a little bit smarter. Like, you want to go shopping at a Dollar Tree, and buy a big ass guitar from Dollar Tree. What the hell do you think is going to be inside? What the hell do you think is going to be inside? What do you think it's going to be made of for $1? and so yes, but whereas you go and buy from a retailer that, like Target, for example, that's very environmental, conscious, they're going to make sure they're buying from, the right manufacturers and the right brands to avoid these types of problems, right?
No, that makes a ton of sense, and it makes me feel better. And yeah, you walk into a dollar store, you could smell the cancer. You don't necessarily smell that in the Target. But yeah, I mean, if our government's going to do anything, this is outside the scope of the conversation, but let's not let that stuff even in the country. I mean, most of it ends up in a landfill within 3 days, and then it's leached into our environment. It's terrible. I want to hear about your business and how it's been affected directly.
Yeah, sure. First of all, I think this is where the government needs to improve, because I've been doing this for 25 years, ever since I graduated college. They don't do a very good job to train a person that's going to import a product from another nation and then distribute it, and it's going to end up in people's home. They just say, hey, you got an EIN number, got a social security number, let us know what you're bringing in, call it a day. Go do whatever you want. Now, that's good and bad, right? Because AKA the opportunities, right? No other nation is going to say, yo, we're not going to audit it. We're not going to check it. The U.S. can. The government can. When you import, they have the right to examine it. They want to make sure you're not bringing any drugs or anything like that. They can examine your stuff anytime. And they do sometimes. But they're not examining it for those cancerous properties and Prop 65 and all the other that causes cancer. What are they monitoring? Yo, they got any cocaine in there? They got any, that's what they're monitoring for. That's just one agency. I might get an audit on a shipment once every 2 years, and we're bringing in hundreds of product. And now, thankfully, we're a good brand in our field, just like in toys. So is Mattel and so is Fisher-Price. Those guys aren't going to sell cancerous properties versus a Dollar Tree brand that you've never heard of, right? It's a different situation. So, for example, when you get in America, right, when you get a driver's license, what does the state and the government do? Before you get a license, guess what? You have to go through this, whether it's driver's education. Could be a 2-3 month course. You got to get a permit. You need a certain time behind the wheel. Before you get the license, you got to go take the driver's test. You got to take the written test, all that stuff, right? There's no process for that for importation. Give us your social security number, import whatever you want. If the government did a better job, I think that problem would be much more lower, because the importers will know.
No, and then held accountable, I guess.
Nobody is held accountable right now.
Well, you comforted me earlier when you told me that there was some regulation and they were checking this stuff out, but now I'm kind of concerned again because it's the wild, wild west.
And again, that's because they're checking people like Apple, Mattel, the big guys, right? But if you go to the flea markets, you don't know where that product is coming from. And that's the problem with America is for us, you could feel better knowing if you're buying at the right retailers, if you're buying at the right stores it's their job to be that audit also. Person like Walmart or Target, there's hundreds of brands pitching them stuff. It's their job to filter through the crap and not think that, oh man, 2 people are selling me a princess doll or whatever. One thing costs $1. It looks the same as the $5 one. Guess what? That $1 probably has cheaper parts, components.
Makes total sense, and they don't want to be liable ultimately. If there's something wrong, they're going to get pulled into it. So get us into your business, how it's been affected directly, what are you going through, how are you dealing with it?
So in our case, our business is small kitchen appliance, specifically air fryers, right? Air fryers retail for what, $100 to $200? The basic air fryer, right? An oven, you put it on your counter or whatever the case is, right? Let's just be honest. To manufacture that in China costs $50 to $100. That's why it sells for $100 to $200 here. The product that sells for $100 cost me around $50 to make. So the day this executive order passed, and it's 130% tariffs, and not only that, the process is completely messed up, right? The government doesn't allow time to pay it. They're saying we want the taxes before you even buy the product. It's like when you go to a grocery store, you buy milk, at the checkout is when you pay for the milk, the product, and then you pay the tax on top of it, right? He's saying, pay me the taxes before you even buy the milk, before you even sell your product.
So help me understand, who's paying the tariff? I know ultimately people say, well, they're going to pass it down to the consumer, and we're seeing varying degrees of that. But who normally is going to pay that tariff? The nation or are you?
In this case, which is why everyone is so upset, is because the importer has to pay it up front. The person who's importing it. In my case, me. In Mattel's case, in Apple's case, it's the Apple company, right? In Mattel's case, it's Mattel, for all the toys. But the problem is, if the importer pays it, in my case, for example, right? You tell me, if my product retails for $100 and I now have to retail that same product for $300 or $350, who's going to buy it?
Me right now as a citizen, I kind of planned on, I mean, none of this came out of left field. He said he was going to do this. I looked ahead and saw the things I needed to buy, and I bought them. I'm planning on not buying anything really till this sorts out.
That's just you stockpiling. Yeah, but what about your kids? That's going to eventually run out. We're talking long term. We're talking 2 years from now, right? At the end of the day, no one's saying that what Trump is trying to achieve is wrong. It's more about how you go about and do this, right? You know, at the end of the day, why do you want to do this in the first place, Mr. Trump? Why do you want to bring all this? Why? Because you want to create more jobs in America. You can do that. There's other ways to do that, dude.
Yeah, I don't think this is a long-term fix. This isn't a long-term solution. This is a short-term shock to the system, see what happens. But then let me ask you, how would you have done it?
I would have first went to the nations, to the export nations like China, and said, hey, look, you guys charge this much money on our product. It's a different type of product. We want a certain type of incentive now. The Chinese government told Trump that, hey, let it be a free trade. We'll give you tariffs on all the imports to your country. We'll give our factory a rebate, and we'll kick back the tariff to you. But keep it free because we don't want the opportunities to go away, right? So had it been me, I would have first worked out. I would have definitely done the tariffs. I'm not disagreeing with Trump to enforce tariffs. I'm okay with that. But there's something within reason, right? If I go to Google, and this is public data, it's public information, you could just put tariff schedule, and the White House has a PDF. Like you can see the site, whitehouse.gov. You know, it's the government website. And they just have all the nations and all the tariffs, and you can see Algeria, 30%, Cambodia, 49%. The numbers that are higher, you could tell he's got some beef with those 10 nations.
So, I mean, look, we're dealing with the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, is it fair to say they're not necessarily the most ethical people? Not the Chinese people per se, the Communist Party, the people in power. I thought we tried signing a deal during Trump's first term that they worked on and negotiated, and then nothing came to fruition. I find it hard to believe if China really made that deal that the U.S. wouldn't take it. But let's say that's true. Here we are. Why aren't they coming to the table and dealing?
They're saying, China is saying, hey, if you don't want that, why don't we work out a balanced tariffs where we're both charging each other the same thing? He's saying no, he's not agreeing to it. For example, China on American imports to China. If a Chinese company brings in American product, the tariff is around 20 to 30%, depending on what the product is. They're saying, yo, charge the nation 15, 20%, and at least that's manageable to the consumer, to our factories, right? Because we're going to the factories and saying, yo, all right, we got it 100. I'm going to my factories and saying, hey, the tariff is 140%. I need you to discount the cost of the product by, I don't know, to zero.
Well, I mean, that's not happening, right? They can't make it. So right now, where's your business at? You're not moving anything right now.
Everyone is in the same boat. Everyone on what, because this has only recently happened, right? It's only been a couple of months. A lot of these manufacturers have product to survive for a certain amount of time, right? Which is where we're at. You know, we had product pre-tariff days, but we're about to run out, and so is and as these people run out, you're going to see these costs on various different things start going up and skyrocketing.
Well, that's where I mean, Trump's got to, hopefully he's got it figured out, but I mean, he's got to make this happen quick because I think the population hasn't really felt the consequences of this yet. And when they do, I know one thing about the American people, they don't have a ton of patience when they don't get their crap.
More money. They don't have the patience, and they're never going to, and once they see that an air fryer or a phone or anything costs like 5 times the price that it was, and it didn't even solve the problem, meaning there ain't no factories here, and it's not going to happen anytime soon. During his last presidency, he did this towards the end of his term, versus now, it's like the first thing he did when he picked off. He's like, you know, my tariffs got screwed because nobody passed it into law. These are just executive orders that he can just, I'm hoping this regulates, but right now, the only thing that's happening right now because of this is the stock market is being manipulated. And he's a huge stock guy. This is why I think this could be potentially a scam, and they're investigating. And he knows when the stock is going to drop. He knew the stock is going to drop the day he launched the tariffs, right? Perfect time to buy. Take him away and funnel the money through wherever the hell he wants.
So, I mean, obviously, he couldn't be buying stock. They're watching him. But people he knows, he's telling them ahead of time.
Ghost investors. Yeah,
I mean, okay, if that's happening, conspiracy. I'm not saying it can't be true, but I don't think that's his motivation ultimately for doing this. I mean, and if everyone's all bent out of shape of that, why can't they pass the freaking bill where they say that the U.S. legislators can't trade stock because they have access to the insider info? And they never pass that law. They let them trade freely. It's like a joke how they'll compare Nancy Pelosi's stock picks to the broader market and she always crushes it. But okay, maybe he's doing that. Where do you see this plane landing?
It's hard to say, it's very hard to say. What I can say is, China is retaliating, but they're at this point, they know these things also, right? So they've been preparing for this. They knew that if Trump became president, the first thing he's going to do is the tariff, right? So like at the factory level, they were already combating this by saying, hey, we need to diversify our portfolio. So now my factories are saying, you're screwed. But over the last 2 years, we've been going out to Mexico, we've been going out to Canada, we've been going out everywhere else to try and make up this business where we know that we're going to lose.
Yeah, you mentioned it earlier, and I think that's our strongest negotiation point when it comes to this is the amount of crap we consume as a nation. We're the big buyer, so everyone wants to do business with us because we could buy. And ultimately, I don't know how it's going to settle out, but we got to make more stuff here. 2 reasons. I've talked about this before in other episodes. My grandfather raised a family of 4 working at a cookie factory. That job's not available anymore, where a guy could work a job that you don't need a college education and support a family for. The society does better when there's those kind of jobs, because the society does better. I really think if there's I'm going to say the mom's at home, but at least one parent's home with the kids. I think overall the children do better, the society does better. It's a healthier thing. The other reason is we need to have capacity to make stuff from a self-preservation standpoint. When it comes to war, like we talked about pharmaceuticals during COVID, everyone was like, whoa, wait a minute. We're all so reliant on China for all this crap. What happens if they want to shut us off?
Dude, in COVID, they couldn't make a mask here. In COVID, they had to import masks from China. That's pathetic.
Pathetic and dangerous, because if the Chinese decide that they want to play dirty with us, and they were doing that to people. They were doing it to people. So that's where I get frustrated. We're $37 trillion in debt. Where the hell have we spent the money on that we're so ill prepared for any of this crap?
And at the end of the day, you're right. See, every brand CEO will tell you the same thing. Sal, you are right. We would love to make product here. We hate working with China. I hate working with them. Half of them are crooks, shady as hell, very horrible communication, don't understand, whatever. But where are the government incentives here? So for someone like me, okay, man, I got no product to sell. I'm going to open a factory here. Okay, government, what are you going to do for me? You're going to give me a grant? Huh? You're going to give me some incentives? You're going to give me a line of credit? What are you going to give me to employ jobs and open? You ain't giving me anything to take the courage and to take the leap to open up. I'm going to have to invest millions of dollars who's going to front the cash to open the factory?
That's the message most people don't hear. The risk, people see someone that's successful and they just see the success. They don't look at the risk, the stress, the aggravation that person went through to get there. Yeah, I'm all for that. And I hope they're doing that. I mean, one of the things they could do is lower some of these. I mean, we need some regulation. We're talking about the environment, but some of these regulations are insane. Unload some of the regulation and yes, make it more easy for people to make. Now, help me understand your business. I don't think you own the plants in China. There's plants in China with capacity to build variety of things to spec. So we need some of those plants here. And someone like you could come with a product and go, make me this product and I'm going to handle the rest. That's what we need here. Some of that.
Yeah, and again, so whoever wants to open that, the government doesn't offer any incentives. They don't offer any help. There's no path. They don't show you any path to do this, what they want you to do. He's just saying, bring the product here, make it here. Okay, well, how are we supposed to make it here?
Yeah, I think he's got to do one of his classic table meetings with a bunch of folks that actually know how to make these places and say, hey, what do you need from us to make them? And I hope that's happening. If that hasn't happened, that's tragic, because that seems like an obvious thing. Let the builders in this country build. And then you tell the country, hey, it's going to be a little bumpy for a while, but we got to do this for the better good. Like if we look at our nation as a family, be like, hey, family, got to strap in, got to go through this for a little bit, but in the long run for your kids and your kids' kids, it's going to be better for all of us. You got any final thoughts?
Just to add to that, right? Even something simple like, hey, Chinese importers, if you guys will qualify any businesses that are importing from China, we see your impact, just like we did in COVID, we'll give you PPP or, emergency funds, per week. Remember how they were doing that? Give us something to show that you care about the working class entrepreneurs here in America.
As a taxpayer, that'd be money I'd be happy to spend. When I see all the money being stolen and ripped off and squandered, and yeah, that seems obvious. Maybe we solved the problem here, but hopefully someone hears it that has any power to do something. Well, this was fun, Zain. I hope you come again, do another conversation. There's a variety of topics we could talk about, not just in your business. Just we were joking about how stuff really works because We hear the media tell us how stuff works, and if you want to be a juvenile and look at the world, the media tells you, sure, but in reality, that's not how it works. What do you got for me?
To be continued. Let's keep it going.
Thanks for joining me. Talk to you soon.
Sing it!
Thanks for joining us for another episode. I hope I got you thinking and out of your comfort zone. Believe me, the biggest fear your government has is a population that is thinking and talking to one another. So get out there, take a risk, start a conversation, make a friend, and reason with each other. Share the show with someone who you think needs to hear it. I wish you peace and love.